Hey everyone, and welcome to Generative Now. I am Michael Mignano, a partner at Lightspeed, and today I'm talking to Rahul Vohra, the visionary founder behind Superhuman, an AI-powered email client that cuts through the clutter of your inbox and was recently acquired by Grammarly. Before Superhuman, Rahul sold his first email startup, Rapportive, to LinkedIn in 2012. And he's also an angel investor in great companies like Mercury, Coda, and Placer. We talk about his philosophy as an investor and founder, his views on where agentic AI is headed, and what's next for Superhuman. So let's dive in. Rahul, so good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. So much I want to talk about with you. Obviously, there's recently been some big news about Superhuman. You're joining Grammarly, which is super exciting. I want to talk all about that. But just for the sake of anyone who's listening or watching who maybe doesn't know about Superhuman, which I would find nearly impossible. They must be living under a rock if they don't. Tell us a little bit about Superhuman, what it is, how you got started, and we'll go from there.
Well, for folks who haven't heard, Superhuman is the most productive email app ever made. Imagine getting through your email twice as fast as before, responding faster to the things that matter, and saving 4 hours or more every single week. On top of that, imagine waking up to an inbox where every email already has a draft reply. You would simply edit and then send. And sometimes you wouldn't even have to edit.
It's really an amazing product. And I believe, at least for me, and I know for so many other people I work with or know of personally, like it feels like Superhuman has kind of changed their lives. It takes this really, really daunting task of getting through your email, which seems to be getting harder constantly with the amount of spam and cold outreach we all get, actually manageable and in many cases delightful. There's so much to unpack with Superhuman. First of all, I was always blown away by the speed of the product. And then second of all, another thing that always stuck out to me about the product was sort of like the distribution strategy and the pricing. And if I remember correctly, and maybe it's still this way, I'm not even sure now, it's sort of like always in a state of beta. It almost felt you're in this sort of exclusive club if you're using Superhuman. You're getting this test flight, but you're also paying for it. Like, give us some of the insight around some of these key breakthroughs with Superhuman.
Sure. Starting with the first piece, when I started Superhuman, I wanted to solve the biggest possible problem. And email is actually a way bigger problem than most people realize. I think it's one of those Silicon Valley blind spots. We're actually predisposed in Silicon Valley to, because so much of us use Slack every day, to not realize how big of a problem email is. And it hit me just after I'd sold my last company, Rapportive, which was also an email company, to LinkedIn. And I was commuting from work in Mountain View to where I lived in San Francisco. And for any of us who had the dubious pleasure of that commute, it's a 1 hour journey. It's quite a while. But this was in 2014, and both Uber and Lyft were having their moment. So I happened to be in the back of an Uber. And on this trip, I finished writing some product documents, clearing out my email, checking my calendar for tomorrow, making dinner plans with my partner. I even called my mother. So I was simultaneously being a productive employee, a proactive boyfriend, and a present son. And I realized in that moment that the real magic of Uber was not commuting. It was not about getting from A to B. It was time, being able to do all these other things. So I asked myself the question, where do we spend all of our time? And it turns out that there are roughly 1 billion professionals on the world. And on average, we spend 3 hours a day reading and writing email. That's 3 billion hours every single day, or north of 1 trillion hours every single year. In fact, I couldn't find anything that we spend more time on. We all spend more time on email than we do any other aspect of our work. Now, at the same time, I could see Gmail and Outlook getting worse every single year, becoming more cluttered, using more memory, consuming more CPU, slowing down your machine, still not working properly offline. And on top of those products, people were installing plugins like my last company, Rapportive, but you'll also know of companies like Boomerang, Mixmax, Clearbit, you name it, people had it. And yet each plugin took those problems I just mentioned of clutter, memory, CPU performance offline, and made all of them dramatically worse. So we decided it is time for change. We set out to rebuild the entire email experience from the ground up. And like I said, today our customers are getting through their email twice as fast as before, responding faster to the things that matter, and saving 4 hours or more every week.
It sounds like time is basically integral to the offering. And if time is integral to the offering, you've got to make the thing as fast as humanly possible. I'm sure there's a lot more to it, but I'm guessing it starts with that. It starts with sort of the mission that you already laid out.
It does. But it's not just the raw speed, because people would often ask, well, okay, you're saving me 100 milliseconds here, 200 milliseconds there, or maybe even a second on page load, that kind of thing. And yet you're claiming also, and people are saying, customers are saying that they're saving 4 hours or more every single week. Like, how does that add up?
Yeah,
Where
how
does
does the
that
math
time
add
saving? Exactly. How does the math? So there are a number of early product decisions that seemed very counterintuitive, but ultimately which were spot on. So number one, speed is the number one feature. And everything that you do, from loading the page through search to sending an email, is blazingly fast. And that's even true if you're on a bad internet connection. Imagine being in the back of a car. That one's usually okay. Or on a plane. That one is the worst. If you've ever tried to use Gmail or Outlook, but especially Gmail, on a United Wi-Fi, I mean, that's the best one, but like any of them, you're going to be waiting 10, 15, 20 seconds just to send an email, and there's like a 70% chance it's not going to go through. So it's really, really painful. And the way I would explain this to investors in the early days is by way of analogy to Tesla. So I raised the pre-seed and the seed and the Series A from 2014 through to 2016. And just like Uber and Lyft were having their heyday, Tesla was also having their heyday. So basically every investor I was pitching had a Tesla. And I would ask them to imagine that feeling of hitting pedal to metal and your vehicle going from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds or less. And then I would ask them to imagine trading that back for a regular gasoline car. And then the emotional reaction was visceral and immediate. These investors were like, hell no, I love my Tesla, you're never taking it away from me. And I said, that's exactly how people will feel once they've experienced truly fast software, the fastest email experience in the world. And then they have to go back to Gmail or Outlook. They'll be like, what am I doing? It's going to be that same kind of reality shift moment where after using Superhuman, they simply can't but live in Superhuman. So that's actually really where the speed came from, or why we started with speed. But there are so many other things that add up to make the math. Like number two, for example, the app is designed for keyboard shortcuts. That means there are almost no buttons to click. It's actually deliberately a bit annoying to use with the mouse. And everything about the app is designed to teach you how to use keyboard shortcuts. And that alone saves hours per week and days per year. Now, since then, of course, we built so much more on top of it. But in those early days, when we were claiming 2 or 3 hours a week, it was really from that plus speed, as well as, and then the final piece was the power of the best Gmail extensions built right on top. So for example, with the Gmail extension Boomerang, which predated Superhuman, you could set a reminder on an email. I believe they were the first company to let you say, if this person doesn't reply, then remind me to follow up. But if they did reply, don't remind me, which is great because it allows you to offboard the mental overhead of remembering who to follow up with and who not to follow up with. Nothing will fall through the cracks. Now with Superhuman, as you know, you can do it at the speed of thought. You can just hit a shortcut, enter a few characters about when it should come back, for example, 2D for 2 days, and then you can immediately stop thinking about it. You'll never drop the ball again. Whereas in products like Boomerang and now Gmail and Outlook, you can of course do this, but it's going to take you over a dozen clicks, and as a result, you only end up doing it on some emails, in which case it's no longer a foolproof system. So those were some of the early product decisions that led to saving hours per week. And of course, the product has massively evolved since then. We have a huge investment in AI, as well as multiplayer and collaboration. But just that collection of features alone was enough to build something significantly better and faster than Gmail.
One of the things that strikes me as really interesting about this, for anyone who maybe hasn't built a product before, or built a technology, maybe this just sounds like, oh, great, they built a better email, but you're building this on top of standards, SMTP and whatnot. And as someone, I built a podcast company on top of RSS and WAV files, and we learned firsthand that like it's really hard to innovate on top of a standard that has ubiquitous adoption. So how did you guys go about doing this? Like, how did you actually create reminders, and how did you create actually faster email when you're at the end of the day, like you're still beholden to the protocol and the standard of SMTP?
Well, fortunately for us, and I'm not sure whether this was the case with Anchor, we were able to deliver a lot of innovation without actually innovating on the core protocol itself. And you don't have to do it that way. There's a famous Paul Graham essay, I think from certainly predating Superhuman, maybe from the 2010 or 11, 12 era, one of the early request for startup essays where he noted, like everyone knew, that email was broken and that it hadn't changed significantly since Gmail innovated with nearly infinite storage and a threading UI. And so his idea was, well, maybe you could put something in the protocol. Most of us technologists know about email headers. It's a good way to stuff information in there. You could put things like priority or tasks or assignee or delegation or all kinds of stuff you could hide in an email. And even if you didn't want to do it in the protocol, you could hide it in the body of the email somewhere. But we didn't do any of that. All we did was focus on the end user experience to say, you know what, we're not going to change SMTP, we're not going to change IMAP. Those are going to continue to work the way that they do. But what we are going to change is the core experience of driving your email application. How can we make that as fast as possible? How can we make that as productive as possible? And what not that many people might know is that before I was a founder, I was actually a game designer. And so I went very deep into the study of what is game design and how do you make things fun to play? How do you make them joyful and delightful as well as just fast? And so for every single thing we did, for example, that reminder case where, going from a dozen clicks to set a 2-day reminder to you have the thought, and before you even know it, you've set a 2-day reminder. That's an application of those early lessons of game design that I was absorbing when I was doing previous stuff.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so just focus on the user experience. Before we get to AI and like how Superhuman is using it, congrats on the acquisition by Grammarly. Obviously, incredible accomplishment. I would love to hear the story of that. Tell us, like, how did this come together? How did these two companies join up? Take us through the play-by-play.
Well, I met Shishir, the CEO of Grammarly, many, many years ago, back in 2017. And as you know, back then, he was the co-founder and CEO of a company called Coda. And we were at a conference, and it was one of those very special moments where nobody else was around. So we could get into some really deep conversation. And this was the Lobby Conference, Lobby Enterprise, put on by, at the time, David Hornick from August Capital, now from Lobby Capital. And he and his team do an incredible job of curating some amazing people. And I think there's a lesson here, actually, for founders that are listening or watching, which is I really did not want to go. This was relatively early in the history of Superhuman, 2017. So just 3 years after we'd started. And, we were probably 10, 15 people at most. And, I just felt like everything would fall to a standstill if I were to leave the office. And I just needed to keep on being around.
Yeah, not the best use of your time. Focus on the product. Yeah.
And, it might seem weird. It's like go hang out in Hawaii for 4 days with 200 other people just like you. It's actually a very compelling pitch, but it was still so difficult for me to go. Nevertheless, my co-founder, Vivek Sodera, who's very well known for being a network extraordinaire, that there was no one he couldn't immediately get in touch with, basically pushed me out of the door and registered for me as I was on the way to the airport. And I'm so thankful he did, because this and so many other amazing things have come out of events like that. So Shishir and I were at this conference, and we were either early or late, I can't remember exactly which, but just the two of us, sitting by the pool, margaritas in hand. And again, no one else was around. And it turns out, and you know this, he's a huge productivity nerd. Coda is a productivity company. But even more than that, back when he was at Microsoft, he worked on Outlook as a software developer. And so he was pre-wired to be super fascinated about Superhuman, what we were doing and why we were doing it. So I show him the product, and it was really early, but he said, "Oh, I really want this. Can you give me access?" And so I onboarded him. And as you know, back then, we only did one-to-one VIP concierge onboardings. So I onboarded him right there, right by the pool. And as those who've gone through an onboarding would know, one of the very last steps is when we ask people to close Gmail. And when I asked him to close Gmail, he was moving his mouse up to that Gmail tab. Another tab caught my eye, which is an app called Krypton. Now I asked Shishir, what is Krypton? And he then proceeded to give me the best product demo I'd seen in years. It was a document, but also a spreadsheet. It was also a database. It was a collaboration tool, as well as a mini app builder. And then, as we know, Krypton eventually renamed to become Coda. And then, of course, Grammarly acquired Coda late last year. Now, when he wrote his acquisition announcement, he said something along the lines of, as I watched the foundational capabilities of AI change just about how every tool and surface operates, I started drafting my 2025 planning memo for the team. I titled it the AI Native Productivity Suite. And when I read that, my jaw dropped because at Superhuman, our vision has always been to build the AI native productivity suite of choice. Email is a critical part of that suite and a much bigger problem than most people realize. As I said, there are billions of us in the world, and we spend north of 1 trillion hours every year on email. So Shashir and I caught up, and over several conversations, it became very clear that we share the same vision, which is to build the AI native productivity suite of choice. And it also turns out that email sits at the very heart of where Grammarly is used today. For professionals, email is actually the #1 use case for Grammarly. Of the top 10 apps that Grammarly is used in, 3 of them are email apps. 17% of the words accepted on Grammarly are accepted in an email experience, and Grammarly helps write more than 50 million emails every single week.
So you guys discover that you basically have the same vision. Two different companies, 2 CEOs, same shared vision. And like all the great acquisitions, you realize, hey, 1 + 1 actually could equal 3 in this situation. We could put 2 things together and walk away with something greater than the parts. And if I'm understanding your strategy, is it effectively that this becomes almost like a horizontal work operating or productivity operating system? You've got email through obviously Superhuman. You've got docs through Coda. You've got I don't even know what you would call Grammarly in this case, like the intelligent sort of like cursor that lives everywhere. And then you have sort of AI powering all of it. Is that like a good way to think about it?
Yeah, almost exactly spot on. Imagine it. Another way of thinking about it is imagine a platform for apps and agents. We think the AI productivity suite of the future is going to be this platform for apps and agents. And so far, we spent most of our time talking about the application side. Of course, you have Coda, which is really a collection of applications. You have email, and then there'll be future applications to look forward to as well there. But you also are going to have an ecosystem of agents, some of which we build, but this is truly an ecosystem, and we think other people are going to come and bring their own agents into this ecosystem because of the distribution. That Grammarly agents, which is really a proto agent, it's one of the very first agents ever made, has north of 40 million users. And we like to think of it as an AI superhighway down which many things could travel. Today, it's really only carrying one agent, which is the agent that helps you improve your spelling, your grammar, and your overall language. But it really could be anything. And this is one of the most misunderstood things about Grammarly. Grammarly itself is this incredible business, makes a ton of revenue off this one agent, but that distribution is perhaps the most powerful thing, because that agent now plugs into north of 500,000 applications and websites. So you could imagine that agent actually being a collection of agents, and then that agent bringing AI to the edge wherever users are working, and also us having a series of first-party applications for the teams that want the best, the most powerful, and the most AI-forward applications that exist.
So you take effectively these sort of vertical workflows, and then on top of it, you layer Grammarly, which, like you said, touches 500,000 more. And when you put it all together, again, you have almost like this, I'm viewing like a horizontal kind of, almost like an operating system. In thinking about it that way, where my head goes is, wow, your competition and who you're really going up against now actually are the OSs. Like it seems like the types of companies that maybe might try to find a similar offering here are the Apples through, Mac OS or iOS, or even Google through the Android operating system. Is that kind of how you're thinking about it?
I don't think so. And
okay,
it's only the operating system companies you mentioned, Google and Apple, to the extent that they also have an interest and a vested interest in building AI assistants, and some of them, Google, especially Apple, to a very small degree, have some kind of productivity and collaboration suite going on. But I think it's inevitable that any company in the future, in the very near future, is going to be building AI assistants and agents. I'm sure you're seeing this as an investor. It's almost like as weird as asking the question, well, are you a mobile company? Or before that, are you an internet company? Which is, of course you are. If you're not building an AI agent or an AI assistant in some form or fashion, then what are you even doing? Like that is it's going to be core to almost every single software company. Now, I think the unique twist that we're cooking up together between Superhuman and Grammarly and Coda is it's not just the agents. It's the agents and the applications. And I think that is very rare. I think we're also seeing other companies attempt to do this. OpenAI attempted to buy Windsurf for various reasons that didn't go through. But I think most companies who are really deep into this game are realizing you can't just have agents running around doing their thing. You also need to own first-party applications to be truly incredibly competitive.
Yeah, and first-party data, right? That seems to be the other big battleground right now. We're seeing all these data walls going up. Obviously, companies like Salesforce and Slack bringing up the data walls. I think I heard Atlassian's doing this as well. And I guess what's interesting about Grammarly is you get this added benefit of kind of both having your own first-party data through the applications, through Coda, through Superhuman, but through the Grammarly sort of agent, like you said, lives in all these different places. I imagine you kind of get data. You almost have this like unique access to third-party data as well. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. So you really do need both. I mean,
yeah.
Imagine answering the exam question: how would you get the most access to first-party data, and then also how can you use third-party data wherever it is, and then also how can you then output that in the most useful fashion? So the applications are what gives the set of agents knowledge about you, your work, the organizational knowledge, and how to pull that all together. So for example, just between Coda and Superhuman, you have the wiki, the documents you may have made to the extent that you're using it for spreadsheets and databases, all of the information there. Plus then with Superhuman, your email, your contacts, your calendar, and very soon you'll be able to connect other sources of information directly to Superhuman. In addition to, now you add that to the Grammarly agent, wherever you happen to be working, what's on the screen at that time. It's already absorbing everything on the screen, running it through an LLM, giving you recommendations. Now you put all of that together, and I think you have an extremely compelling AI productivity suite, or as you even said, an AI operating system that helps you be, we believe, like an order of magnitude more effective.
So what are the other verticalized workflows you need to own in this operating system? Again, you've got docs, you've got email. What are the next ones? You mentioned calendar. Calendar plays a role as well, I guess. There's got to be others as well if you're going to build sort of like this new AI workspace of the future.
I think we're still figuring out the order. So I'll give you a little bit more of a zoomed out answer, which is,
okay.
Often people ask me, well, why did you sell Superhuman to Grammarly? You didn't have to sell Superhuman. For example, we would have been break even this time next year. We grew twice as fast last year as we did the year before. But the real answer is how exciting the combination was. It was like you were saying, that 1 + 1 = 3 approach. And with this deal, we're just going to have access to significantly greater resources to pursue the vision that we want to pursue, and Grammarly also pursuing that vision, which turns out to be the same vision. So we're going to be investing even more than we've done so far, which has been a lot. So even more than that, in our core email experience and in AI. We're going to be building out calendar. We're going to be building out tasks. And if you're in Superhuman today and keeping a close eye on it, you'll know we're very, very close to a fully featured calendar experience. And we're going to connect all three of those things beautifully together. I will then reimagine chat and redefine collaboration. And that will pull on everything that we've learned about work communication over the last 10 years. And then, like we've been talking about, we're also going to create this new way of working with AI agents. And we think the big upside there is that these agents are going to free all of us up to be more creative, more strategic, and closer to achieving our human potential. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a glimpse into what's to come there.
So one of the things that is keep bouncing around inside of my head as I hear you tell this story is something that Shashir, the Grammarly CEO, Coda founder, has spoken a lot about to me, and I know to others on the internet, and that is the concept of bundling. Shashir's got this somewhat famous essay about sort of the benefits of bundling and the strategy for bundling, and super fan overlap and weak fan overlap. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. We'll drop a link in the notes here. But how much of bundling and bundling theory factored into this? Because again, it seems like now you're taking these verticalized workflows and bundling them together. And it strikes me that some of these have very, very strong overlap in terms of their potential users, and some of them have weaker overlap, which actually turns out to be a good thing for bundling. So how much of that is the strategy here?
Yeah, I think it was a pretty big part of the strategy is to create this really, really compelling bundle. And then for those that don't know, Shashir is the bundling master. The essay, I believe, is called The Four Myths of Bundling, if I'm getting that right.
That's right.
And of
The
course,
four myths of bundling. Yeah.
You can read it on Coda. It's a really great Coda essay. Whilst you're there, you can read my product market fit essay, another really great Coda essay. And I'm going to do my best. I'm not the expert. Shashir's the expert. But let's see if I can help explain some of the thinking behind this. So you can take any given product and you have strong fans and casual fans. And a strong fan is someone who would buy it a la carte independently at like the individual retail list price. And a casual fan is someone who is going to appreciate it if it's part of a bundle. Of course, we did a lot of analysis between Grammarly and Coda and Superhuman, but especially Grammarly and Superhuman, to see what kind of overlap there is. And to your point, it's immediately intuitive, if you haven't spent a lot of time thinking about this, to think, well, you want really high, strong fan overlap. Like maybe you want most of the Superhuman user base to be the kind of person who would have bought Grammarly independently. And you want most of the Grammarly user base to be the kind of person who would have bought Superhuman independently. But actually, you don't want that. What you want is, of course, for there to be some strong fan overlap, but for there to be very high casual fan overlap. So you want most of the Superhuman user base to be the kind of person who, maybe they were on the verge of buying Grammarly, but perhaps they didn't quite. But when there's a bundle that presents both, they're all in. And that's the thing that makes them buy. And of course, the way the numbers work out, because there are tens of millions of people, 40 million people plus on the Grammarly side, you want most of those people to be casual fans of Superhuman. Maybe they wouldn't quite have bought it independently, but in the bundle, wow, that's the thing that gets them really excited. And so we did the analysis, and it turns out that happens to be exactly the case. Like we're really excited for the strong fan, casual fan dynamics within the combined user base. And so yes, of course, we are working towards a bundle, as you would expect, with the three primary Coda Grammarly Superhuman application, or Coda is really a number of applications today. And so we're super excited about the potential of that. And as also you might expect, with the bundling master himself running the show, we're very, very disciplined about how we think about that.
That's really, really cool. It's super fascinating. Yeah, I've heard Shashir talk many times about pricing strategy and business model innovation and stuff like that. So it's really cool to see it all coming together in this new combined company. One of the things I've been thinking a lot about is the labs, the big labs, the model providers, OpenAI, Anthropic to some extent. How do you think about companies like that, let's pick on OpenAI for a second, which is clearly, it seems like, trying to do everything, right? So almost like vertical and horizontal all at once. They're baking in more and more workflows directly into the product, but then they're also trying to find ways to pull in data sort of from applications that they don't have direct access to with their recording mode now and things like that. I guess, are we headed towards a world in which AI is going to exist in the products we already use, like Superhuman or Coda? Or do we worry at all about, one model to rule them all, where increasingly more of our productivity and more of the things we do are going to pop up from these labs and exist just inside the window of, say, a ChatGPT? How do you guys think about that?
Great question. I am definitely not worried about the one model to rule them all for a whole number of reasons. I think that, well, first of all, that ship has already sailed, right? There are multiple infinitely deep-pocketed, well-resourced, going after building incredible models, and of course, they all do. So we're already in a world where there are a number of different models. You could argue that OpenAI has a 6-month head start. We use OpenAI for all of our models, and that's the reason why. They tend to have the best models for almost anything you could possibly want by about roughly 6 months. But on the other hand, that is also only 6 months. And so there's a model for every shape and size of use case or job to be done that you have. And we're already past the point where there's one model to rule them all. I think it was Satya who said that OpenAI and ChatGPT really is, at this point, a consumer-facing application company. And I think that reflects the fact that it reflects the previous conversation around first-party and third-party data. And if you're Google, or if you're Microsoft, or even if you're Apple, once they start to figure that stuff out, you have all of this first-party data. And so not only do you have world-class models, you can then also combine it with what even OpenAI has been saying will turn out to be the most important thing, which is the information about you. It is not just the memories about you, but the data about you, and especially the data that your work organization has. So that's exactly why I think OpenAI is going after building some of these applications like the voice transcriber and recorder and the note taker, because they have to, in order to be sustainable in the long term. I think they have to figure out their application strategy. And I think it's great. They make really, really great user experiences. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out. But I don't think we're headed towards a monopoly. I think there are just so many different people going after this that you're going to have not even an oligopoly. You have probably 10, 15 players that are able to make a play for this ecosystem of assistants, models, and applications. But not everyone's going to have to build their own model. We think that's one of the most exciting things about what we're doing at Grammarly is we can play in this space, we can build these experiences, but without the insane capital requirements of training our own foundational models.
What models do you use? And do you expose them to the users in any of the products to give them the choice? Or are you just sort of picking on the back end?
So we at Superhuman, the mail product, we use almost entirely OpenAI models because they're about 6 months ahead of the competition and generally the best for what we do. We also have a really great relationship with OpenAI. We collaborate with them really deeply across really everything we do. We were one of, for example, the 3 design partners for Codex, which the engineering team has been loving. So a really fantastic relationship with them. That's the simple answer.
Got it. So I'm curious how Superhuman, you just mentioned Codex, actually. I'm curious how Superhuman as a company uses AI, not in terms of like how what you build into Superhuman as the features and the things you offer to your users, but like, what do you as a CEO use in terms of AI? What does your team use? What do your engineers use? What do your designers use? And did any of that inspire any of the thinking around the acquisition?
The application that has by far been saving me the most time is an application called Whisper. That's WSPR. It is a incredible dictation app. So as CEO, I spend most of my time actually editing and reviewing. I'm not creating from scratch at this point. I'm mostly giving direction on things that have been created from scratch by others. And so that will often take place in Coda or in Notion or in Loom or in Figma. Those are the 4 places where I'm generally editing. And sometimes that editing takes the form of moving pixels around the screen, but more often than not, it actually takes the form of comments. And so the way it might work is I'll be looking at a Figma design and I scan through it and I see 50 comments that I have to make. Now, in the old days, I would have to, hit C, click the thing, type out my comment. And if it's towards the end of the day, then my fingers are already hurting, I'm already tired, and I just start going slow. But no matter what time of day it is now, I can just hold down function, the key on my keyboard, say what I want to say. And I'm often more eloquent when I'm speaking than I am when I'm typing. I'm, for whatever reason, happen to be one of those people that can just do fully formed sentences, and it generally comes out nearly perfect. And I just put that into Figma. And so as a result, I've been able to go 3 to 4 times faster. So imagine saving 75% of your editing and reviewing time. I'm literally getting back probably 2-3 hours a day due to this application, Whisper. Incredible company. Everybody should check it out. And that's on top of the many hours that I'm saving with Superhuman, on top of the many hours that I'm saving with Loom and all of these other applications that we're using as well. So for me, that's been the biggest shift. Does that play into the acquisition strategy? Not the strategy per se, but I think it kind of percolates into our thinking. I'm a huge proponent of voice when it comes to AI. We're going to be investing heavily in voice at Superhuman, so stay tuned for more there.
What about the team? What is the team using? It sounds like you mentioned you were a design partner in Codex, so maybe you're using Codex, Cursor, any of these tools, or any meeting recorders, things like that.
I feel like we have the whole panoply of meeting recorders. I'm a Granola super fan. I'm a designer by background, so I love the attention to detail that the Granola team have put into that. If the Gorilla people are watching, you're doing a fantastic job. I love it. But we also have Fireflies. We have Otter. I think there are some people at Superhuman who use Fathom. We don't really have a policy at this point, nor do I think should we, on what meeting recorder people are using, and which is an interesting strategic position. I think there's definitely going to be a race there to build the first truly multiplayer and collaborative meeting recorder. And then I think, connecting it into Slack, which is where we happen to collaborate, is going to be that next level. So imagine a meeting recorder that's with you on every meeting. And then for your internal meetings, it's actually also then pasting it into Slack. And then you now are able to then search it via your Slack search. There is this kind of fully unified world that I think we all wish we were living in, but we're quite far away from that world right now. So that's meeting recorders. The other big one, we of course use Cursor, we do use Codex, but the other big one that's been a huge, huge shift for us is V0. As recently as 6 to 9 months ago, we were doing our prototyping in Figma, which I know is not best practice because you're looking at high fidelity designs and you're really thinking about low fidelity concepts. You're thinking about interaction and does it make sense on a large scale for this piece to be over here and that piece to be over there, for this screen to follow that screen. And it can be distracting to look at the pixels, but nevertheless, that's how we were doing it. We were doing it with relatively high fidelity Lego pieces. And it would slow us down. I'll give you a specific example. We have been pulled up market into the enterprise over the course of the last few years, which, by the way, is super exciting. Our largest customer now has 30,000 employees. We have thousands of seats at that customer. As you might expect, they use Office 365, which is Outlook. And if you are an Outlook native emailer, then you think about email and especially calendar very differently than if you are a Gmail native emailer. For 10-ish years, we were able to go to a Gmail user and say, okay, continue using Google Calendar, but use Superhuman for your email. But you can't go to an Outlook customer and say, hey, use Superhuman for your email, but you know what? Just leave Outlook open in the background for your calendar. And whenever you need to, you can switch back to that because that feels broken. That feels like, wait a minute, you didn't replace Outlook. You're asking me to leave it open and sure, I'll go back there for calendar. But the next thing I know, I'm sucked into doing my email back in Outlook. So it turns out in order to serve the Outlook customer, we had to build a fully fledged calendar inside of Superhuman, which, as an aside to the aside, is that's one of the most terrifying and disheartening things to learn as a founder is in order to make your product work for the 89% of the market that is Outlook based, you're going to have to build a whole other startup inside your startup, which is the calendar startup. But on the other hand, it's also a fantastic moat, right? Because who is
just going to say that
going to rebuild Right, it's crazy, right? Who's going to, rebuild Superhuman on Mac, Windows Web, Gmail, iOS, Android, Office 365? It's all of that, and then on top of that, rebuild the entire calendar stack on top of all of those things. It's super hard. So it turned out to be this incredible mode. We learned that we had to, build up this calendar experience, and so we're now hurtling towards this world where there's a fully fledged calendar inside of Superhuman. There is already a nearly fully fledged calendar inside of Superhuman today. Many people might not realize it because we haven't exposed it. But if you hit 0, you'll see a calendar sidebar. If you hit 0 again, you'll see a full week calendar view. And we're just about to start implementing a left rail on top of the right rail. So the left rail is going to have icons down the left-hand side. It'll have email. It'll have calendar. It'll have AI as a full AI sidebar, and you'll be able to click into all of those things or open up that new left experience. Now, what does that mean? That means we have to completely revisit how we lay out the application. It's very finely tuned right now. How big is the right sidebar? How big is the main view? How does that change depending on your resolution? How does that change depending on the window size? And how does that change given the new left rail and all the new left sidebars that we're about to build? So this is the kind of thing where you could mock it up in Figma. It's going to be incredibly difficult, very time consuming. There are all kinds of breakpoints to consider. And it would have taken us 2 or 3 weeks to do this the way that we were historically doing it. Instead, one of our product managers, Ben, created a V0 prototype just in 24 hours. I think it may have been 48 hours, that fully replicate to within like 90% fidelity the rough shapes and sizes of all the things on the Superhuman application screen. And we were able to test multiple different layout algorithms on multiple different window sizes in a responsive way. We could just sort of resize the window in V0 directly. And that's turned out to be a huge, huge time saver. We're now using this in almost every design project that has some kind of interaction or layout component. We're mocking it up in our V0 prototype first, saving hours, if not days, if not weeks of effort before we come back into doing the high fidelity design in Figma.
Really, really cool. And is Ben technical, the PM you mentioned, or is he just like vibe coding this in V0?
Technical-ish, but like primarily vibe coding. Before Superhuman,
Wow.
He was a growth product manager, has not worked, to my knowledge, as an engineer professionally. So yeah, vibe coded.
That's so cool. So one other thing I wanted to ask you is, you mentioned it earlier in the conversation that this is actually your second acquisition. Your previous company you had sold to LinkedIn. Acquisitions are always complicated, right? Integration can be challenging. There's a lot of details to figure out and then to implement. I guess what have you learned maybe from the first acquisition that you're sort of taking into this one and making sure things go smoothly over the coming months?
I think the answer is a ton. And I've written a very widely shared piece on how not just to survive, but also to thrive in an acquisition. I believe it's titled Founders, How to Stop Worrying and Love Being Acquired. Maybe we can put it in the show notes or folks can just search for it. They'll find it. I think I wrote down 15 hard-earned lessons that every founder should know. An example of one is the honeymoon period is not a honeymoon. After you sell, there will be a 3-month roughly honeymoon period. During this time, no one will be bothering you, and you will be tempted to take it easy, especially if your exit was stressful or the circumstances of growing the company were hard. But under no circumstances should you take it easy. Instead, the lesson is to take a real vacation before starting and then work insanely hard to deliver brilliant results ahead of schedule, or as we say at Grammarly, put points on the board ahead of schedule. And I think that will set the tone for your tenure at the company, and not just your tenure, but the entire acquisition. Several Rapportive investors shared that advice to me as we were selling Rapportive, and I'm still thankful to this day. I plan to carry that philosophy into Grammarly.
So then I have to ask you, where are you going on vacation?
Oh, good question. We will be in Europe, in Berlin, and then in Poland, of all places, before I come back to start my first day at Grammarly.
Amazing. Well, I hope you have a great trip, and congrats again on the acquisition. Thank you so much for taking us through all of this. It was fascinating, and really excited for this next chapter of Superhuman.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Generative Now. If you liked this episode, please rate and review the show. And of course, subscribe. It really does help. And if you want to learn more, follow Lightspeed at LightspeedVP on X, YouTube, or LinkedIn. Generative Now is produced by Lightspeed in partnership with Pod People. I am Michael Mignano, and we will be back next week. See you then.